The Beetle was going to be the first Volkswagen ever released out of Wolfsburg or produced by Volkswagen that would release in North America first and Europe secondary. While thinking, wow, we could have an influential hand in shaping the flavor of what tuning on this unique looking retro flavored platform would be.
Tell me about the very first Beetle. How did that come about?
So picture a young gun with a German language, German family, and the confidence to get on an airplane at that time and fly over to Germany. I had been studying relentlessly, reading some publications. We didn't have the big World Wide Web at the time. And there was a show in Germany called the Automechanika. It happened every 2 years. So I thought, oh, that would be wonderful. Took my then girlfriend, later, a year later, wife, and we flew to Germany and we attended the Automechanika, which blew my hair back. Never seen anything like this. They called it the Messe, the halls. I mean, today, Las Vegas SEMA show might rival the feeling of it, but not to the scale, with the focal being German cars. Not here where Germans, in North America, where German cars were the import. So in '96, I was there and I picked up this book called the D&W Parts Catalog. Oh my goodness. This was a Bible of car parts and scantily clad ladies, and it was just all on display and inspirational. And in '96, ironically, touring this venue, I met a young buck by the name of Klaus Wolfhard. Later, as we know today, KW, or the KW of KW. So I'd had this exposure, I understood how everything worked. I really embedded my understanding that Germany would set the tone and the trends of North America. Years later, when the platforms would arrive, would adopt them. So as I'm creating the culture of HPA in the workshop, I'm taking this knowledge there, and there are only two ever cars that have gone from the drawing board into production that reshaped the automotive trajectory. One was the Viper, which I have great deep respect for what Chrysler did to bring that to life. And the other was the Beetle in '98. You could argue the Audi TT Gen 1, because that took Audi from the square box into the pathway it is today, but the Beetle really stood out. And when I saw the very first renderings of the Beetle, I was blown away by it. But what really inspired me was the inside knowledge that the Beetle was going to be the first Volkswagen ever released out of Wolfsburg or produced by Volkswagen that would release in North America first and Europe secondary. My brain went wild thinking, wow, we could have an influential hand in shaping the flavor of what tuning on this unique looking retro flavored platform would be. And this well before the Mini, you had the PT Cruisers, all this era of retro flavor coming out. So for the next year and a half, I was inking up ideas and flew over to Europe again in '98 for the Automechanika show, met Klaus Wolfhard for the second time, engaged with the idea to bring his brand to North America, met with a company called Höfle for Beetle spoilers and Beetle gauge pod ideas. They were a manufacturer of high-end plastics. Flew into California, met with an exhaust manufacturer here in North America, and started creating a look and a feel for the Beetle. But I wanted it to be different. I didn't want to get stuck in a sea of upstart companies. At the time we had something called APC, where we made these white tail lights and some god-awful things too, but also very trendy. Flew down to them in San Francisco, met with them about ideas about making lights for the Beetle. I really wanted to create the all-encompassing footprint for the Beetle. But it was all white noise. What it needed was the soul, and it wasn't going to get that. And the soul of Volkswagen, in my mind, the GTI, the Corrado, was the VR6. And around me at the time, a Mark II had to have a VR6 swapped into it. It was just a must. So the Beetle finally landed in Canada. 8 days into it, we wanted to be the first owners, which we were. I think we got number 3 or number 6 in Canada. I'd have to go back to think about that. But I remember going into the bank, RBC, sitting with my bank manager, Sebastian was his name, said, I need to take out a loan to buy this Beetle. He goes, okay, yep, look at it. And I aim to take it apart The very day again, he's like, oh no, geez, you can't tell me that. That's our asset. You can't tell me you're about to blow it apart. Because I don't know if I can in good conscience sign this loan paperwork. He did. We got the loan. We went to Guilford Motors, bought the very first one, and the salesman offered to take me for a drive and show me all the features. I'm like, literally, please not. He goes, it's mandatory. Volkswagen Canada says every salesman has to go for a ride and drive. So I said, okay, buckle up, son. We're gonna go for a drive. And this poor Beetle, I think the salesman was holding, bracing, the posture. We pulled back into the sales lot. Front brakes were smoking. The catalytic converter made smells that to this day still haunt me. The motor had a little tick to it. And I go, can I leave now? And off we went. That night, the motor was out and the work began. And within a few short weeks, we were down in California, Long Beach, with Road and Track, rocking the very first VR6 swap Beetle, riding on KWs, showcasing big Momo wheels, our exhaust, we called it the GT6 with the VR6 swap, had our gauge pod. We created a driver's edition. Now, we really thought the hype would be on the exhaust and the coilovers and the aesthetic appeal. I can tell you, I had no idea that 44 GT6 Beetles later, we would be in the VR6 swapping business, and that would be the sole focal point. We would later start KW North America, run that through to 2005, where we turned the control of the company back to the founder, Klaus Wolfhard. But that Beetle, that VR6, that moment, that attention changed the trajectory.
Tell me about some of these iconic builds. What were some of the stories from those early GT6 builds?
Honestly, every GT6 has a very unique, special story. Number 007, for Microsoft executive, front-wheel drive, Roadtrek supercharged, 3.1 stroker motor, Quaife gearbox, phenomenal car, and I know that one is living down the East Coast with 18,000 original miles on it. My favorite one, however, is that one that went to Motor Trend, the 2001 that we debuted at the SEMA show. We'd just been in California where we were being held up against a Hennessy Viper, the Haltech, I think it was S2000 with a big supercharger on it. The amount of Mustangs and things that we were up against was phenomenal, range of cars, but they all failed to make it through Motor Trend's gamut of testing. So we did this. We did 0 to 60 in 4 seconds, which blew them away. Our braking was 110 feet. It was phenomenal. We outbroke the Viper by 12 feet at that speed. So picture this, we come back from California from all this adrenaline and success. We're back on what was called 8th Avenue in South Surrey, 90-degree turns in and around horse properties. I've got my brother-in-law in the car. We got the little flower vase on the Beetle. We've got our sponsorship stickers. It's a midnight blue Beetle wide-body Porsche wheels with all these stickers, a little yellow flower in the vase. We come to a 4-way stop, and there's a Hennessy Venom 650 Viper. Gorgeous. Of course, stereotypical wax mustache driver with cowboy hat, a beautiful blonde co-pilot in the passenger seat. He looks over at me, laughs, does a total drifter in front of me, and takes off. You can imagine what inspired me. As he was collecting himself in his drift, I was already grabbing gears with my all-wheel drive, clutching out of the hole at my 4-second blistering speed. I see him looking up to the rearview mirror to see in awe and smoke how far he'd gapped me, not to realize that he couldn't see me there, and he looked to his shoulder and we were mirror to mirror, drag racing towards this 90-degree hard turn. Now I have the confidence, even with his girthy big rubber and my narrow framed rubber, that I'm going to outbrake him, because I had just been at a test in California that week. We're going at this breakneck speed, and I hog down on the binders, big Porsche binders, and he hits and he locks up, and he goes straight off. There's this big telephone pole that he just misses, but it was a banked 90-degree turn. As he goes off the drop, both rocker sills and side dumps crunch, stopped. I stop, I back up, roll down the window, ask everything's okay. I get the flipped off bird, so I do the little Herbie beep, 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 and I do a 4-wheel roaster and take off. Not feeling so bad that when he would later read the Motor Trend magazine, he'd understand that we were poised to perform. The irony was, I roll in 2 weeks later to my body shop, which was R&N Boyd at the time. Russell was the master fabricator who would help us at the time before we were doing the floor pans on our own. I roll in there, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's this Viper. I go, what's that in here for with its crushed up side dump rockers? Ah, yeah, his wife got hung up on a speed bump in a shopping mall. I'm like, his wife, eh? Wink, wink, nod, nod. Allow me to tell you the stories. And we didn't have digital cameras. I had a bloody Polaroid. I went back to shoot a picture of these big, fat, black streaks going up this 90-degree corner where the speed bump in the parking lot his wife hit was. That was a story that lived forever, that here was this Viper in the body shop, that our little Beetle showcased what stopping power and acceleration was. And I think that that is kind of the flavor that followed almost every GT6 that was ever built. We built one in a gentleman by name of, oh my gosh, what's his name? He's in Ohio, and he would stuff the GT6 tailpipe full of stainless wool, go to the drag races with his twin turbo, and race for pink slips, never letting on what he had. And he was dominating out there. Unfortunately, he did pass away, but wonderful fellow. Every GT6 Beetle was bought and built by an owner with that David versus Goliath mentality. You'd never see it coming. You'd enjoy the ambiguity of the Beetle, but you'd have this ferocious heart under the skin. And it just got you into all kinds of fun stories to tell.
These Beetles started off NA, and you just mentioned twin turbo. When did that relationship with our partners in Germany start?
Yeah, so the very first Beetle #1, GT6 #1 was a white, beautiful 12-valve swapped machine. By the time we got down to 5 and 6, I flew back to Germany, went to ABT, Abt, met with Christian Abt, and I bought all 13 remaining stroker kits, and went to Schrick, got their Schrick big valve heads, their intakes, their cams, and we went back home and we built 13, it was 12, we built 12 Beetles. I had a 13th engine set, 3.1 stroker, big valve head cam, Schrick intake manifold power plants. We worked with Quaife to do the 6-speed add-on to the 5-speed. Quaife differentials and had big front wheel drive power. We then dabbled with Rotrex, which was a alternator-sized belt-driven supercharger. It looked like a turbo in a supercharger body. And then I was flipping through a magazine one day, and there was this crazy Mark III twin turbo in this French magazine. Can't quite remember the magazine title. And the name was HGP, and there was no internet. So literally got on the flight, flew back to Germany, hunted these people out, showed up on their doorstep in this little, Omden was the town, drove my rental car, knocked on the door, introduced myself, and Ute Quaife and Martin Quaife, two young individuals before children, were in there in this little humble little garage building these twin turbo kits. I was awestruck. I went home, flew back, brought my Sony Handycam, worked with them, filmed the process, built an engine there, worked in my blue coveralls, forklifts and everything. I worked there for 2 weeks learning the craft, brought that back home with the training videos I created, cultured my small team at the time, and together with Martin's support, we brought the very first twin turbo Beetle into existence. And to this day, I will say that Martin Graf is probably the smartest individual I've ever met in my entire life. He has more knowledge in his pinky fingers than most people would even forget today. It's unbelievable knowledge this man has. His wife Ute is one of the most earnest, humble, sweetest people you could ever meet. And together we've been working since late 90s, 99, and here we are at 2026, seamlessly together. Collaborative, you know, they've flown here, we've flown there. The door is always open. My son went to study in Spain 2 years ago. They offered to drive if they ever need anything. We stayed there, they'd help him out being in a foreign part of the world. Just humble, good, earnest people. But they also have a work ethic and a mindset for durability, and they helped infuse that into my malleable mind, that you build something for a lifetime. And in Germany, you have to appreciate, you can get out of the gates at the Frankfurt airport, jump on the A5, drive to Stuttgart, hours long, pin the wood, speedometer north of 300k an hour if the car would do it, and it has to hold. Here in North America, we get out, we do 35 miles an hour, or 50k an hour, and it has to hold. There's a total different respect of what a durable package is. And the stacked EGTs, the oiling, the durability, you have to build it to an Autobahn standard, and you bring it here into the North American marketplace, you'll find success. So we adopted that thankfully at an early age. That aligned with what Volkswagen later taught us when we built the RGTs later in the sequence of our trajectory. But what a world the Beetle opened up for us. It went from the concept rendering showcased in '96 to an inspirational path up to its creation of the GT6 in '98 to where we are today, still building all-wheel drive V6 powered Beetles for a select lucky few.
And speaking of Beetles, one of your favorite daily drivers is your RSI, and HPA has a history with that platform. Of course, it's the precursor to the R32. So tell me about the RSI and HPA's history with that.
Obviously, the rendering in '96 inspired HPA today. Later, the concept RSI that debuted at the Detroit Auto Show blew my hair back. This wide body girth, all-wheel drive, factory V6. I was nervous at first. Was the factory going to build what I was enjoying building, the V6 powered machines, but that a manufacturer could graft in for limited series production, all-wheel drive, V6, Alcantara, aluminum Recaro carbon fiber. It was unheard of, unthinkable, and sadly unavailable. In North America, it was taboo, could not buy it. Crash standards, emissions was not met. I was lucky enough to get an invitation to the factory in Volkswagen in Mexico. So flew down through Texas into Pueblo, toured the factory, was blown away by the automation, was blown away by the roads, from perfect flat paved roads to dirt roads with a million potholes that the traffic was traveling on, the parallels between wealth and no wealth. And you get to the factory and everyone, all the workers were so humble and respectful, and the German mindset was so tidy and precise. And then on the outside, there's this tent. I don't want to say glorified Kwanzaa hut, but literally a tent on the outside of the factory where these RSI Beetles were being built in a mini series production line. So we did a little bit of horse trading, and we were able to, luckily enough, acquire C-cans worth of extras. At one time, I probably had 40 sets of RSI wheels and 6 sets of complete body kits and interiors and seats. And I could build 6 complete RSIs on my own with brand new floor pans, 4 motions. I still, to this day, probably have half a dozen rear assemblies stacked up with no miles on them. Brought this all home, and we started creating the HPA RSI. So we built clones. They started on Turbo S's, 03 models, grafted in the 4-wheel drive, brand new floor pans, brand new running gear, tunnel shafts, Alcantara headliners with the radios. Some got the authentic interior, some got more of an upgraded sport interior based on what the customer wanted. Didn't quite know how special that Beetle was until we were called by some authentic owners in Ireland, in Mexico, and Germany. We flew HPA staff on site, pulled the motors out, shipped them to Vancouver, built them, shipped them back, flew there and installed them to create the HPA twin turbo on the authentic RSI. For years, I kept one complete set of everything to build myself an RSI, and we'd moved to our shop in Port Cowles, and eventually I got frustrated one day, needed space. I laid it all out, shot it, sold it. I think it went to somewhere in Pennsylvania, I can't quite recall. Wasn't 12 months later, I had remorse. Why did I do that? I love that Beetle, it meant so much. So I went on a global hunt, and lucky for me, one popped up at a dealership in Tokyo. So right away I said, money's coming. Wired the money, put it on a boat, floated it to Vancouver. That is the RSI I daily drive today in the spring and the summer months. You may have seen some of the road trips I've done with it as of late. A lot of people are like, when are you twin turboing? And I said, well, not that I'm worried about keeping it authentic, but I have 3 young boys all driving Volkswagens, and we're doing these road trips, and right now my naturally aspirated 3.2 liter RSI runs with my son's 3.2 manual Gen 2 Audi TT, or my soon to be 12 valve VR6 swapped Mark III wide body 4-door that the eldest has, or the Mark III Jetta that my youngest one is putting together for this year's road trip. So I can play toe to toe, plate to plate. I go back to that leapfrog moment that I enjoyed at the ages of 18 to 20 as the HPA car club. I'm reliving that with my own kids. I don't have to gap them right now. Eventually they're going to get their turbo kits and their FTX final editions, and they're all going to do a version of performance mods, and maybe at that time my RSI comes in and a twin turbo goes onto it before the last manifolds disappear. To be determined, but that Beetle as it is bar none the best balanced driver's car. It has phenomenal placement of the shifter and weight, the right amount of weight and grip, incredible headroom, unbelievable aero, a wide enough tire that Volkswagen's always struggled with to not get an understeer, outfit with the right KW Club Sport where I get a proper attitude front to rear. I can inspire that oversteer that I need to enjoy. That is a miracle on wheels, that car to drive. It's analog enough that you feel confident, and I've said it in one of my recent interviews with a guest that came up that when I drive it, I drive with confidence that when I pick up a road chip or something happens to a mirror, these are high volume production parts. I can get them everywhere. It's not like my Corrado. I have a 12-valve VR Corrado that the windshield's unobtainium. The headlights, everything about it, if I drive it and damage it or hit a moose, I feel that I'd never be able to restore it. The Beetle, I have this confidence to enjoy it, and the looks I get when people see this thing in the wild covered with bugs and tar and road paint as I'm enjoying the miles blows them away that I'm pulling this thing out and using it. And I thought the next person, when I'm gone, they can restore it and enjoy it, but at least I've enjoyed it for what it was designed to be, driven. That's our motto. When I started the company, and we did all the illegal drag racing behind the airport in Vancouver, everything we did in the day was built to be driven. And that we hold close to the chest today with everything that we deliver.